Welcome back to another deep dive. Today we're really going for it. We are not just skimming the surface of a famous story. We are going spelunking.
That's a great way to put it.
We are descending into one of the most intense, I think, emotionally charged and theologically heavy sections of the entire Bible. We're looking at a moment in history that is freezing cold, literally it's winter in the text, and while politically it's boiling over.
It really is. We're zooming in on what scholars call the late Judean ministry of Jesus. This is the final stretch before the Passion Week. The clock is ticking down, and it's ticking down rapidly.
You can feel the tension.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The political climate is icy. The religious leaders are openly hostile. And we're going to walk through John chapters 10 and 11 in a way we really haven't before.
And the stakes couldn't be higher. Just to give everyone a roadmap, we are looking at the famous Good Shepherd discourse, then a really tense confrontation at a winter festival that almost ends in a riot.
Almost ends in a stoning, yeah.
And then perhaps the biggest mic drop miracle of Jesus's entire career, the raising of Lazarus from the dead.
And because this is a deep dive, we aren't just reading the verses. We're applying a specific methodology. We've got this whole stack of sources here, commentaries, historical data, linguistic analysis, and they all suggest using what we're calling a fourfold lens.
I love this concept. Let's explain that before we jump in. So even though our main text is from the Gospel of John, we're going to analyze the events through the perspectives of all four Gospel writers. It's like putting on 3D glasses, but, with 4 dimensions.
Right. Think of it like a diamond. You turn it and see different facets.
Yeah.
If you only look at it through one angle, you miss the depth, you miss the brilliance. So we have Matthew. Matthew always writes with a specific goal to show Jesus as the king.
The royal authority.
Exactly. The Messiah of Israel. Whenever we see Jesus asserting authority or fulfilling Old Testament prophecy about the throne, that is the Matthew lens. We're asking, where's the king here?
Okay, so that's the king. Then we have Mark.
Mark is the lens of the servant. Mark is just. It's breathless. He uses the word immediately, constantly. He focuses on Jesus' actions, his sacrifices, his role as the suffering servant who came to give his life as a ransom. It's gritty. It's action-oriented.
And Luke. Luke's the doctor, the historian.
Yeah, and Luke gives us the lens of the ultimate man. He's fascinated by Jesus' humanity, his emotions, his empathy, his prayer life, his care for the marginalized, the women, the poor, the outcasts. Luke shows us the Jesus who feels, who connects socially and emotionally.
And finally, John, which is our primary text for today.
John is the lens of God. He starts his gospel in the heavens. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. He emphasizes the divinity of Christ, the great I am statements, the oneness with the Father. So as we walk through these chapters, we're going to keep asking, how do we see the king, the servant, the man, and God in these specific events?
That is going to be our compass. Okay, let's set the scene. We're in Jerusalem. It's the aftermath of this huge controversy. In John chapter 9, Jesus healed a man born blind. It was an undeniable, spectacular miracle.
A miracle no one else had ever done.
Right. But instead of celebrating the religious leaders, the Pharisees, they interrogate the guy. They interrogate his parents, and eventually they cast him out of the synagogue.
They excommunicated him. And that is the crucial context for part 1. The Good Shepherd discourse in John 10:1-21. You have these religious elites acting as the gatekeepers of God. They think they own the sheep. They decide who comes in and who goes out.
And they just threw a vulnerable lamb out into the cold because he dared to testify to the truth.
Precisely. So Jesus steps up and says, effectively, you guys think you're the shepherds. Let me tell you what a real shepherd looks like. And he starts with this imagery of the sheepfold. Now, I think a lot of us, we picture a cute little wooden fence in a green Irish meadow or something.
Right, something from a storybook.
But that's not first century Judea. The terrain is rocky, it's arid, it's dangerous. A sheepfold was a fortress. It was an enclosure with high walls made of field stones, piled one on top of the other. Often, they would put briars or thorns along the top of the wall to stop wolves or thieves from climbing over.
It sounds more like a bunker than a barn.
It had to be. And it had only one opening, a single door. Jesus sets up this metaphor, which the text calls a paroimia in Greek. It's like a dark saying or a figure of speech, more than a simple parable. He says, truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber.
So who are the thieves and robbers in this context? He's not being subtle, is he?
Not at all. He's looking right at the Pharisees. The people who climb over the wall are those who try to access God's people through illegitimate means. They use stealth, legalism, intimidation, or violence. They don't have the right to lead, so they force their way in.
They bypass the heart of the law to enforce the letter of their traditions.
That's it exactly. They're climbing the wall.
Oh,
but
yeah. The shepherd's different.
The shepherd walks up to the door, and the doorkeeper, who could represent the Holy Spirit or maybe the prophetic witness of the Old Testament, opens it for him. He has legitimate authority. He doesn't need to sneak in.
And this leads to this crucial point about the voice. The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name.
This is one of my favorite details in the sources. In the ancient Near East, it wasn't uncommon for multiple flocks to share a single large sheepfold at night for protection. So in the morning, you might have 3 or 4 different herds all mixed together.
Chaos.
Total chaos. How do you sort them out? You don't brand them like cattle. You don't use sheepdogs to herd them aggressively from behind.
So how does the shepherd get his specific sheep out of that mess?
The shepherd stands at the gate and calls. He has a specific call, a unique tone, a particular melody, and only his sheep respond to it. They literally filter themselves out of the crowd because they know that voice. They trust that voice.
The sources used an analogy of a parent in a crowded playground.
It's a perfect analogy. Imagine a chaotic room, kids screaming, maybe music playing. It's a wall of noise. But if a mother calls her child's name, that child's brain is wired to isolate that specific frequency. They hear mom through all this static. That is the relationship Jesus is describing.
It's not just following orders. It's auditory recognition based on intimacy.
Yes. The sheep follow because they know the one who is calling.
So let's apply our fourfold lens here. How does Matthew, the lens of the king, see this?
Matthew would immediately connect this to the Old Testament prophets, specifically Ezekiel 34. I mean, that chapter is just a blistering takedown of the shepherds of Israel, the bad kings and corrupt religious leaders.
Right. God condemns them for feeding themselves and starving the flock.
Yes. And God makes this incredible promise. He says, I myself will be the shepherd of my sheep. He says he will search for them, rescue them, and lead them.
So when Jesus calls himself the Good Shepherd, he isn't just using some nice rustic metaphor. He is claiming the throne.
He is absolutely claiming the throne. He is saying, I am the fulfillment of Ezekiel's prophecy. I am the shepherd king who has come to rescue the flock from the false leaders. It is a direct claim of royal authority. He is the true heir of David, who of course was also a shepherd.
Okay, that's powerful. What about Mark, the servant?
Mark would focus on the aspect of protection. A king rules, but a servant bleeds. Mark would highlight the shepherd putting his body between the wolf and the flock. It emphasizes the gritty, dangerous work of serving the sheep. It's not a glorious job sitting on a throne. It's a dirty, dangerous one out in the elements.
And Luke, the ultimate man.
Luke would zoom right in on that relational detail. He calls his own sheep by name. That is so profound. He doesn't just know the flock as a collective noun. He knows the individual.
He knows you.
He knows you. He knows the one with the limp. He knows the one that always wanders off. It highlights Jesus' deep personal empathy and humanity. He relates to us not as a data set, but as persons with names and stories.
And John naturally sees God.
For John, it's always about the deity. So John gives us the I am. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. But before that, he says something else, something that can be a little confusing. He says, I am the door.
Let's unpack I am the door, because that sounds a bit, well, redundant if he's also the shepherd who goes through the door.
It's a brilliant shift in the metaphor. When shepherds were out in the open country during the summer, they didn't always have access to these permanent stone sheepfolds. They would build a rough circle of rocks or brush enclosure. And there was no actual wooden gate.
So what did they do for a door?
At night, the shepherd himself would wrap himself in his cloak and lie down across the opening.
Wow. So he literally became the physical barrier.
Yes. For a wolf to get in, it had to cross the shepherd's body. For a sheep to wander out and get lost, it had to cross the shepherd's body. So when Jesus says, I am the door, he is saying, I am the exclusive point of access to the Father, and I am the living, breathing security system for your soul.
That is a powerful image of security. But he also contrasts himself with the hireling. Who is the hireling?
The hireling is the wage worker. He's a contractor. He doesn't own the sheep. They aren't his investment, his inheritance. He's just there for the paycheck.
So when the wolf shows up,
he does the math. Is my life worth this daily wage? Absolutely not. And he runs. He abandons the sheep to save his own skin.
this feels like a direct critique of leadership that is transactional versus leadership that is, well, sacrificial.
It is the definition of the difference. The hireling operates on self-interest. The shepherd operates on love. The sources point out that the hireling represents sin in leadership, using the people for your own gain, for status, for money. But the Good Shepherd lays down his life.
And Jesus really emphasizes the voluntary nature of this. He says, "No one takes my life from me, but I lay it down of my own accord."
And that, right there, is the lens of John, the lens of God. Jesus isn't a tragic victim of a Roman execution plot. He's not a martyr who gets cornered. He is the sovereign author of the entire drama.
He's in complete control.
Complete control. He says, I have the authority to lay it down, and I have the authority to take it up again. That is a claim to absolute divinity.
In verse 16, "And I have other sheep that are not of this fold."
That is not a throwaway line. That is a prophetic bombshell.
Okay, unpack it for us.
The fold he is speaking to is Judaism, the covenant people of Israel. But he is saying, my mission is bigger than you think. I'm not done yet. The other sheep are the Gentiles, the nations of the world, everyone outside the fold of Israel.
So he's predicting the creation of the church.
He is predicting the creation of the church where Jewish and Gentile believers become one flock under one shepherd. This would have been scandalous to his audience, the idea of bringing the Gentiles in as equals. It was revolutionary.
It's a vision of global unity.
It is. It connects all the way forward to Revelation chapter 7, where you see this great multitude from every nation, tribe, and tongue. And it says, the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. It's the ultimate gathering.
And what's the reaction from the crowd to all this?
Division. Verse 19, there was a division again among the Jews because of these words. It's a recurring theme in John. Jesus speaks, and people are forced to choose a side.
Some call him demon-possessed. They say, he's mad.
Right. They try to dismiss him with a medical or spiritual diagnosis. It's easier than engaging with his claims. But others, they push back. They say, wait a minute. These are not the words of one who is demon-possessed. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind?
You see the struggle.
You really do.
Yeah.
Their theology tells them one thing. This man is a blasphemer. But the empirical evidence the blind man sees tells them another. They are wrestling with that cognitive dissonance.
And that really brings part one to a close. Jesus has established himself as the true shepherd. Now, the timeline jumps a little. We fast forward out 2 months.
Yeah, time has passed. The seasons have changed. It's now winter. And we are back in Jerusalem for the Feast of Dedication.
Now, most of our listeners probably know this by a different name. Hanukkah.
Yes. And understanding Hanukkah, the history of it, is absolutely essential to understanding this confrontation.
Okay, so give us the history lesson. What exactly are they celebrating?
They are celebrating a revolution. About 160 years before Jesus, a Syrian Greek ruler named Antiochus IV, who called himself Antiochus Epiphanes, which means God manifest.
Subtle.
Very subtle. He tried to wipe out the Jewish religion. He outlawed circumcision. He burned every copy of the Torah he could find. And in the ultimate act of desecration, he marched into the Holy of Holies, sacrificed a pig on the altar, and set up a statue of Zeus.
That is horrific. Just unimaginable to them.
It was the ultimate abomination. It sparked a revolt led by a priestly family, the Maccabees. They were basically guerrilla fighters hiding in the hills. And against all odds, they defeated the massive Syrian armies, they liberated Jerusalem, and they cleansed or rededicated the temple. That's what Hanukkah means, dedication.
So the whole vibe of this festival is, we kicked out the foreign oppressor, we purified God's house, and we are free. It's very nationalistic.
Right. Exactly. It's a festival of national pride and military victory. And here's Jesus walking in Solomon's porch, a beautiful colonnade on the east side of the temple that was believed to have survived the destruction of the first temple. It's a symbol of the ancient king, of Solomon's glory.
And the irony is just dripping off the page, isn't it?
It's so thick you could cut it with a knife. They are celebrating a past deliverance from a tyrant while rejecting the true deliverer standing right in front of them. They were celebrating the cleansing of a stone temple while plotting to kill the one who called himself the true temple.
So the Jews gather around him, and the text says they surrounded him. That feels aggressive.
It is aggressive.
Yeah.
The Greek word implies they hemmed him in, they encircled him. It's an ambush. And they come at him with this demand. How long will you hold our soul in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly.
They want a straight answer, a simple yes or no. Are you the Messiah?
But you have to ask, what do they mean by Messiah? They are at Hanukkah. They are thinking about the Maccabees. They want a military general. They want a political savior. They want someone to stand up and say, yes, I am the Messiah. Grab your swords. We are taking out the Romans tonight.
So it's a trap. If Jesus says yes to that question, he's inciting a riot and the Romans will crush him. If he says no, he's lying.
It's a perfect trap. So Jesus answers by redefining the terms. He says, I told you, and you do not believe. He points back to his works, his miracles, as his credentials The signs speak for themselves. But then he drops the hammer. He says, "But you do not believe because you are not of my sheep."
Ouch! That circles right back to the shepherd discourse from 2 months earlier.
It does. He's saying their lack of belief isn't an intellectual problem. It's a spiritual identity problem. It's a relationship problem. They don't have the hardware to receive his signal because they aren't tuned to his voice. He then reaffirms the security of his true sheep, saying, "No one will snatch them out of my hand."
And then in verse 30, he drops what I think you call the nuclear bomb of theology. He says, "I and the Father are one."
This is the peak of the mountain. This is the claim. And let's look at this through the lens of John, the lens of God. In Greek, the word for one is hen. It's a neuter word, not a masculine one.
Why does the grammar matter so much here?
Because if he had used the masculine form, he would be saying, "I and the Father are the same person." That would be a heresy called Sabellianism. It blurs the distinction between the Father and the Son. But by using the neuter, he is saying, "I and the Father are one thing, one essence, one nature, one substance, distinct persons, but unified in their divinity."
And the crowd, they get it immediately. There's no confusion. They pick up stones.
They don't need a Greek lesson. They know blasphemy when they hear it. Leviticus 24 is clear. Blasphemy is punishable by stoning. They are ready to act as judge, jury, and executioner on the spot.
And Jesus stops them with a question. "I have shown you many good works from the Father. For which of them are you going to stone me?"
It's almost sarcastic, isn't it? It's so sharp. Let's be specific here, gentlemen. Are you stoning me for healing the blind man? Was it feeding the 5,000 that crossed the line for you?
And their reply is just as direct. "It is not for a good work that we are going to stone you, but for blasphemy, because you, being a man, make yourself God."
And there it is. For anyone who says Jesus never claimed to be God, the church invented that later. Well, this verse is a huge problem because his enemies certainly thought he said it. They were ready to kill him for it.
Now, Jesus' defense here is fascinating and honestly a little confusing for a lot of modern readers. He quotes Psalm 82. He says, "Is it not written in your law? I said, you are gods."
Yes, this is a deep dive favorite. Let's break this down because it's brilliant. He is quoting Psalm 82, verse 6. In that psalm, God is presiding over a divine council, and he's addressing the corrupt judges of Israel, the human magistrates who are supposed to represent God's justice on earth.
And in Hebrew, they were referred to as Elohim.
Exactly. The word Elohim is usually translated God, but it can also mean powerful beings, angels, or in this case, human judges who hold a divine office. They were called gods with a small g. Not because they were divine beings, but because they were meant to speak for God and administer his law.
But the psalm goes on to condemn them, right? It's not a compliment.
Not at all. He says, "You are gods, nevertheless you shall die like men." They were corrupt, and God was judging them.
So why on earth does Jesus quote this? It seems like a strange defense.
It's a classic rabbinic argument called qual vahomer, which means from the light to the heavy, or from the lesser to the greater. It's an if, then how much more argument.
Okay, walk us through it.
He is saying, look at your own Bible. God in your scripture called corrupt mortal human judges gods simply because the word of God came to them. That is in your text. You can't deny it.
Okay, I follow. That's the premise.
So, Jesus continues, if scripture can use that title for mere men who simply receive the word, how can you charge me with blasphemy when I am the one whom the Father sanctified and sent into the world? I didn't just receive the word. I am the word made flesh.
Ah, I see. He's saying, my credentials are so much higher. If that lesser case isn't blasphemy according to your own law, how can my much greater case possibly be blasphemy?
Exactly. He isn't denying his deity. He is using their own legal text to dismantle their accusation. He's trapping them in their own logic. It's an absolutely brilliant, airtight defense.
That is brilliant, but it doesn't seem to calm them down.
No, it just makes them more furious because they can't refute it. So they try to seize him again. But John tells us he escaped from their hands. It's another one of those quiet reminders of his sovereignty. His hour had not yet come. Nothing takes his life. He lays it down when he chooses.
So he retreats. He leaves the hostile zone of Jerusalem and goes back across the Jordan River to Perea.
He does. But he isn't going to stay away for long. And this brings us to part 3, which is really the climax of the entire book of John up to this point, the death and raising of Lazarus.
This is the 7th and final sign in John's Gospel. We move from the winter cold of Jerusalem to the nearby village of Bethany, about 2 miles outside the city.
And we're introduced to this family, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, a family that John specifically says Jesus loved.
We need to view this through the lens of Luke, the ultimate man. Luke shows us that Jesus had friends. He wasn't just this itinerant preacher who was always on. He had a place where he could crash, take off his sandals, and just be with people he loved.
It humanizes him so much, doesn't it? He had a favorite place to stay, a home away from home.
So Lazarus gets sick, really sick. And the sisters, Mary and Martha, they send a message to Jesus. And the message itself is fascinating. They don't say, come right now and heal him.
No, they say, Lord, he whom you love is ill.
They appeal to his love, not his duty or his power. It's such a beautiful model of prayer. It's based on relationship.
It really is. But then we hit this paradox. Verse 6. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was.
The so, or therefore, just hangs there like a heavy weight. He loved them, therefore he waited.
It feels completely backwards. If you love someone, you rush to the ER, you drop everything, you don't sit around for 2 days.
And this is maybe the hardest lesson in the whole chapter. Divine love doesn't always look like immediate rescue. Sometimes God's love looks like a delay, and the question is, why?
Because Jesus has a greater glory in mind. He tells his disciples, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. He doesn't want to just perform another healing. He wants to reveal a resurrection. Healing Lazarus prevents death. Raising Lazarus defeats death.
That's a huge distinction.
It's everything. But the disciples are just confused. After 2 days, Jesus finally says, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up.
And they take it literally. It's almost comical.
Yeah, it's a common euphemism for death in the Old Testament, but the disciples are like, oh, if he's sleeping, he'll get better. Great. We don't need to go back to Judea where they just tried to stone you.
So Jesus has to be blunt with them. Lazarus is dead. And then Thomas speaks up. And I feel like Thomas gets a bad rap as doubting Thomas, but look at what he says here.
Thomas is the realist, maybe the pessimist of the group. He knows going back to Judea is a death sentence. The stones are still piled up from the Feast of Dedication. He sees no good outcome here. But he says, let us also go that we may die with him.
That is just raw courage. It's pessimistic for sure, but it is intensely loyal.
It's the lens of the disciple.
Yeah.
He's willing to follow the king into the fire, even if he's convinced it's a suicide mission. He's all in, even when he can't see the logic.
So they finally make the journey and arrive at Bethany. And John makes a point to tell us Lazarus has been in the tomb for 4 days. Why does he specify 4 days? Is that significant?
Oh, it is hugely significant. In Jewish tradition and cultural belief at the time, there was this idea that the spirit of the deceased hovered near the body for 3 days, hoping to re-enter.
So for 3 days, there was a sliver of hope, maybe.
A sliver, yes. A miracle could be explained away as a swoon or a coma. But by the 4th day...
decomposition has set in.
Exactly. The face changes, the body bloats. As Martha bluntly says later, he stinketh. By the 4th day, hope is legally, theologically, and biologically gone. Jesus waited until the situation was utterly, completely impossible so that the miracle would be undeniable.
So Jesus arrives, and Martha, ever the practical one, runs out to meet him. And we see this really interesting interplay between Martha and Mary.
We do. Martha's the theologian here. She confronts Jesus. Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. It's a statement of faith in his power, but it's also a cry of deep regret and maybe even a little bit of accusation.
And Jesus steers her from a future doctrine to a present reality. Martha says, I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. She has her theology correct. She knows the creed.
She does. But Jesus gently corrects her focus. He doesn't say, you're right, that event will happen. He says, I am the resurrection and the life.
He personalizes it.
He brings it from a future concept into a present person. He's saying, Martha, resurrection isn't an event on God's calendar. It's a person standing right in front of you. He creates a whole new category. You don't need to wait for the end times. The power of the end times is broken into the present.
Then Mary comes up, and she says the exact same words as Martha. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.
Same words, but a totally different posture. Martha stood and debated theology. Mary falls at his feet and weeps. She is the lens of emotion, of pure grief. And Jesus responds differently to her. With Martha, he reasoned. With Mary, he weeps.
Jesus wept. Verse 35.
The shortest verse in the English Bible, but it's infinitely deep. Through the lens of Luke, we see the ultimate man, fully human, feeling the crushing weight of grief. He knows he's about to raise Lazarus. He knows the happy ending is minutes away. But He still pauses to enter into the pain of his friends. He weeps with those who weep.
But the sources point out something else in the Greek text. It says he was deeply moved and troubled.
Yes, the Greek word there is enibrimisato. It's a very strong word. It's the sound a horse makes when it snorts in anger or agitation. It implies indignation, fury.
Furious at what? At who?
At the enemy. At death itself. He sees the havoc that sin and death have wreaked on his good creation. He sees the tears of Mary and Martha, and he is indignant that death has this tyrannical power over humanity. He is marching to that tomb not just as a comforter, but as a warrior going to battle.
So he gets to the tomb. It's a cave with a large stone rolled across the entrance, and he commands them to take away the stone.
Notice the synergy there. He asks humans to do what they can do, move the stone so he can do what only he can do, raise the dead. He invites our participation.
And then he prays. Not a prayer of petition, but of thanks.
A prayer of thanksgiving. Through the lens of John unity with the Father. He says it out loud for the benefit of the people standing here. He wants the crowd to know that this power comes from God, not from magic, or, as his enemies claimed, from demons.
And then comes the shout, Lazarus, come forth!
Some of the early church fathers, like Augustine, they famously speculated that if Jesus hadn't specified Lazarus, the power in that command was so great that the entire cemetery might have emptied out. It was a specific personal command for a specific man.
And out he comes, bound hand and foot in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a cloth.
Can you imagine the scene? A mummy shuffling out of a dark cave? It must have been terrifying and wonderful all at once.
And Jesus' final command in the scene is, unbind him and let him go.
And there's such a beautiful application there for us. Jesus gives the life, but he calls the community to unbind the person. We get to help remove the grave clothes, the old habits, the trauma, the shame, the past, after Jesus gives someone new life.
Now, you would think this would be the moment where everyone, friend and foe, falls down and worships. The guy was dead for 4 days. He's walking around.
And many do believe. But this brings us to our final section, part 4. The conspiracy. Miracles polarize. They force a decision. And some of the witnesses don't go tell their friends. They run to the Pharisees to report what happened.
The Sanhedrin gathers. This is the Supreme Court of Israel, the ruling council.
Yeah.
And their reaction is, well, it's fear, isn't it?
It is pure political calculus.
Yeah.
Listen to their reasonings right there in the text. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation.
Our place in our nation, not God's temple or God's people. It's about their status.
It's about their status, their power, their institution. Precisely. They view Jesus not as a potential Messiah, but as a political liability. If he starts a movement and it turns into an uprising, Rome will bring the legions down and crush Jerusalem. So they decide to sacrifice truth to save the institution. It is the ultimate sin of leadership.
And then Caiaphas speaks up. He's the high priest that year. He says, you know nothing at all. It is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish.
And talk about irony. Caiaphas means this as cold-blooded political expediency. Let's kill this one peasant preacher to keep the peace with Rome and save ourselves. It's a purely utilitarian calculation.
But John, the gospel writer, tells us there's a profound double meaning here.
Yes. John adds this incredible commentary. He says Caiaphas didn't say this on his own, but because he was high priest that year, he was unknowingly prophesying. God hijacked his words. God used a wicked man's wicked intention to speak the deepest theological truth of the gospel.
That Jesus would die for the people.
Exactly. Jesus would die for the nation. And not just for that nation, John adds, but to gather into one the scattered children of God from all over the world.
So Caiaphas prophesied the substitutionary atonement without even knowing it.
He did. He thought he was plotting a murder. He was actually predicting a sacrifice. It just shows God's absolute sovereignty over history. Even the enemies of God end up serving his redemptive narrative.
The result is formal. From that day on, the decision is made. Jesus must be killed. And so he withdraws to Ephraim, a town near the wilderness.
The shepherd has confronted the wolves. The life has confronted death. And now the religious machine has officially decided to crush him. The path to the cross is set.
So let's move to part 5. Synthesis and application. So what? We've looked at the shepherd, the feast, the tomb, and the conspiracy. How do we pull all these threads together for you, the listener?
I think we have to start by looking at the spiritual battle that's happening behind the scenes. Throughout this entire deep dive, we've seen two forces at work. You have the thief, the wolf Satan, who comes only to steal, kill, and destroy.
We see him in the false shepherds, in the fear of the Sanhedrin.
Absolutely. He wants to scatter the sheep. He wants to keep Lazarus in the grave. He wants to use the Sanhedrin's political fear to destroy the Messiah.
And then you have the shepherd.
Who comes that they may have life and have it abundantly. But notice his strategy. It's so counterintuitive. He doesn't fight with swords. He fights by laying down his life. He defeats the wolf by sacrificing himself. He defeats death by entering into it and blowing it apart from the inside.
It's the upside-down kingdom. The king conquers by dying. The servant leads by suffering.
And think about all the prophetic fulfillments we've seen. We have seen Ezekiel 34, the true shepherd, coming to replace the false ones. We have seen Psalm 23, the shepherd, walking with his sheep through the valley of the shadow of death. We have seen Isaiah 53 hinted at in Caiaphas' prophecy, the one man dying for the people. It's all weaving together.
Okay, what about for us today? For the listener driving to work or doing dishes right now, what are the big takeaways?
I think there are three big ones for me. First, learning to hear the shepherd's voice. We live in a world that is just screaming for our attention. Thieves and robbers are climbing over the walls of our phones and our screens every single day. Media, fear, consumerism, politics. We have to intentionally tune our ears to the shepherd's frequency.
And that comes back to that word you used earlier, intimacy. You have to spend time with the shepherd to know his voice.
You do. Second, dealing with God's delays. We all have Lazarus moments in our lives. We pray, we trust, we beg God to show up, and nothing happens. In fact, things get worse. The illness leads to death. The relationship ends. The job is lost. This text teaches us that God's delays are not his denials. They are often setups for a much greater glory than we could have imagined.
That is so hard to swallow in the moment, though, to trust that the 2-day delay is actually an act of love.
It is incredibly hard, but remember, Jesus wept. He is not indifferent or stoic in the face of the pain that the delay causes. He feels it with you, even while he is orchestrating an outcome you can't yet see.
And the third takeaway?
The role of the community. Unbind him and let him go. We are surrounded by people who have been given new life by Jesus, but are still shuffling around in the grave clothes of their past addiction, shame, fear, trauma. It is the job of the church, of friends, of family, to step in and help unwrap those bindings so they can walk in freedom.
That's a beautiful image. We get to participate in setting people free.
We do. We can't give the life, that's Jesus' job, but we can help remove the barriers that keep people from fully living it.
So as we wrap up, we've seen Jesus through that fourfold lens. The king commanding death to release its prisoner, the servant walking willingly into the most dangerous place for our sake, the man weeping for a friend, and God claiming absolute oneness with the Father.
In this moment, the raising of Lazarus really is the hinge of the whole gospel. It's the tipping point. The very miracle that proved his absolute power is the very thing that sealed his death warrant.
Because he raised Lazarus from the dead, he would be crucified.
That's the great exchange.
Yeah.
His life for Lazarus.
Yeah.
His life for ours.
And here is a final provocative thought to leave you with. We call this the resurrection of Lazarus, but technically, it was a resuscitation.
That's a critical distinction. Lazarus came out of the tomb, but he still had to die again one day. He got his mortal life back for a few more years. But Jesus, he is about to go to Jerusalem, lay down his life, and take it up again. Not to mortal life, but to immortal, glorified, never-ending life.
Lazarus was the signpost. Jesus is the destination.
Exactly. Lazarus was the preview. Easter is the feature presentation.
And that is where we leave it today. The shepherd is moving toward the cross, the conspiracy is set, and the glory of God is about to be revealed in the most unexpected way. Thank you for diving deep with us.
Keep listening for the voice.
We'll see you next time.